Acura has never built an RDX that made people stop and stare. That's not an insult. It's a business strategy they've lived by for 2 decades. Safe, competent, slightly anonymous. Until now. The 2027 RDX is the first time Acura's product team appears to have asked a genuinely uncomfortable question. What if playing it safe is exactly why we're losing? Because the numbers don't lie. BMW X3, Mercedes GLC, Audi Q5. They've been eating Acura's lunch in this segment for years, and the response from Honda's luxury division has mostly been incremental tweaks and cautious facelifts. What you're about to see is neither of those things. Now, whether that's cause for celebration or concern, I'll let you decide, but I need you to stay with me through the powertrain section, because there's something buried in Acura's press materials that changes how you have to think about this entire vehicle. The stakes here aren't abstract. If you're someone who's been loyal to Acura, who bought the legend, the Integra, who remembers when Honda's performance division actually meant something, what Acura does with the 2027 RDX is going to tell you whether that loyalty was ever warranted or whether it's time to reconsider. The front end is the first signal that something has shifted inside Acura's design studios. Gone is the Pentagon grille that divided opinions for years. And personally, I won't mourn it. It was a bold idea that never fully resolved itself, a shape searching for a face that never arrived. The 2027 car replaces it with what Acura is calling a precision shield fascia, a wide, low, horizontally structured front that finally gives the RDX a sense of visual mass it never had before. That LED signature lighting is now continuous across the full width, connecting headlamp to headlamp in a single unbroken line. It reads as confident in photographs. In person, reports suggested reds as genuinely commanding, the kind of presence you used to associate with German iron at twice the price. The hood has a subtle power dome, nothing dramatic, but it hints at something underneath, and that hint turns out to be entirely intentional, for reasons we'll get to. Walk around to the back, and the story continues. The taillights mirror the front's horizontal emphasis, a full-width LED bar that ties the design together with a coherence that previous RDX generations never achieved. The rear bumper is cleaner, with integrated exhaust outlets that sit flush rather than dangling awkwardly as afterthoughts. If you ask me, this is the strongest rear end Acura has ever put on a compact crossover. It's not trying to be a sports car, it's trying to be dignified, and it succeeds. The overall silhouette has a slightly longer roofline than the outgoing model, which addresses one of the persistent criticisms of the previous generation, a rear passenger experience that felt like an afterthought. More on that in a moment. Open the door and you're stepping into a cabin that, for the first time in a long time, actually justifies Acura's luxury positioning. There's a quality of surface here, the way materials meet edges, the way ambient light catches the dash, that reminds you of what it felt like to finally afford something real, not a pretend luxury car with a premium badge stitched onto an economy platform, something with considered intention in every panel. The old dual-screen arrangement that drew consistent criticism is gone. In its place, a single curved display, 14.2 inches, running Acura's next-generation AcuraLink system with Google integration fully embedded. Now, here's where I have a problem with this. Acura's infotainment history is not exactly a confidence-inspiring track record. They've stumbled through interface generations with frustrating consistency. The hardware here looks exceptional. Whether the software delivers on the promise of that hardware is a question the first 90 days of ownership will answer, not a press release. The physical controls for climate remain, positioned below the screen. Someone at Acura had the wisdom to understand that touch-only climate systems are a distraction problem, not a feature. That decision alone deserves acknowledgement. The seats are wrapped in open-pore leather with contrast stitching, and I'll be honest, it carries a scent and texture that used to mean something specific, the kind of material that the first time you touched it told you that you'd arrived somewhere, not rich necessarily, just earned. That's what quality leather used to communicate before everything became synthetic approximation. Acura appears to understand that their core buyer remembers the difference. Rear passenger space has expanded by a meaningful margin, 3 inches of additional legroom that transforms the back seat from a punishment to an actual option. Here's what Acura buried. The 2027 RDX will offer, for the first time in the nameplate's history, a Type S powertrain option at launch, not as a delayed variant, a turbocharged 2.0 liter producing 320 horsepower, paired with a new 10-speed automatic and available super handling all-wheel drive. That's the fact. Here's the context. Acura has historically reserved genuine performance credentials for vehicles that arrive 2 years after the base model, after the segment conversation has already moved on. Launching with the Type S means this RDX enters the competitive window against the X3 M40i, against the Q5S, as a complete argument, not a promise. And the implication? This is Acura signaling that they understand what segment they're actually competing in, not on price, on character. There's a version of this story where Acura plays it safe again, earns respectful reviews, and watches the segment drift further toward brands with stronger emotional gravity. This isn't that version. What this 2027 RDX represents is a company finally willing to be remembered for something. And for those of us who watched Acura earn its reputation in the late 80s and then spend 30 years slowly spending it down, that matters more than any specification on a sheet. Whether it's enough is a question only time and real-world ownership will answer. But for the first time in a long time, I find myself genuinely curious about the answer. Drop your thoughts below. I want to know where you stand on this one. Let me tell you something. I have been watching the automotive industry for a long time, decades, and in that time, I have seen brands rise, fall, reinvent themselves, embarrass themselves, and occasionally, just occasionally, genuinely surprise me. Acura has done all of those things at one point or another, but what they just revealed with the 2027 RDX concept has done something I did not expect. It made me stop. It made me think. And honestly, it made me a little bit angry because they had the answer this whole time and they waited until now to show it to us. Let me give you some context, because context matters. If you have been following Acura since the beginning, and I mean the real beginning, back when they launched in 1986 as the first Japanese luxury brand to enter the American market, you understand what this company was supposed to be. They came out swinging with the Legend and the Integra. Those were not just good cars for Japanese brands. Those were genuinely excellent cars by any standard. The Legend competed with European sedans and held its own. The Integra was a driver's car in every sense of the word. Acura, in those early years, had a soul. It had a point of view. It stood for something. Then, somewhere along the way, something got lost. The brand started chasing volume. They started making decisions by committee. You can feel a car that was designed by committee versus a car that was designed by people who actually care. And for a long stretch of Acura's history, particularly through the 2000s and into the 2010s, those cars felt like the result of a very long meeting where nobody wanted to offend anybody. Inoffensive, competent, forgettable. The RDX has been Acura's best-selling vehicle for years now. That is not an accident. It sits in the sweet spot of the market. Compact luxury SUV, reasonable price point, practical enough for families, but positioned aspirationally enough that buyers feel good about the purchase. But here is my honest opinion. The RDX has been coasting. It has been doing its job without inspiring anyone. It sells because the segment is enormous and Acura has a loyal customer base, not because it is doing anything particularly bold or visionary. And I think Acura knows that. I think this new direction with the 2027 model is their admission that coasting is no longer an option. Now here is where it gets interesting. The automotive landscape that the 2027 RDX is entering is completely different from the one that shaped previous generations of this vehicle. When Acura was designing the current generation, Tesla was still considered a novelty by a lot of people in the industry. The idea that an electric vehicle could outsell a well-established luxury SUV in the same price bracket seemed far-fetched. That is not the reality anymore. The segment has been transformed. Every major manufacturer is either already selling electric luxury SUVs or has announced them. Genesis, BMW, Mercedes, Cadillac, Lincoln, they are all in this space now, and they are coming with serious products backed by serious engineering budgets. So what does Acura do? They could have played it safe. They could have taken the current RDX added some electrification, freshened the styling, called it new, and moved on. That is what a brand in defensive mode does. That is what a brand that has already given up on the idea of being a leader does. And I will be honest with you, there was a part of me that expected exactly that, because that is the Acura I had gotten used to, the Acura that plays it safe. What they have actually shown with this concept tells a different story, and whether you believe concepts translate to production reality or not. And we will talk about that, because that skepticism is absolutely warranted. The direction they are signaling here is not what I was prepared for. Let me talk about the powertrain philosophy first, because this is where my personal opinion diverges from a lot of the mainstream automotive coverage I have seen on this reveal. Most of the conversation has been about the electrification strategy, and yes, that matters. But what strikes me more is the underlying approach to how power is managed and delivered. Acura has been developing what they are calling a next-generation sport hybrid SHAUE system, and the evolution of that technology in the context of the 2027 RDX suggests they are not treating electrification as a checkbox. They are using it as an opportunity to do something that pure internal combustion never allowed them to do cleanly, which is to deliver genuinely precise, genuinely responsive torque vectoring at a level that changes the fundamental character of the vehicle. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is a concept, and concepts have a way of promising things that engineering budgets and production realities quietly walk back. I have been burned before. We all have. Remember when brands would show you a concept with some revolutionary powertrain technology, and then the production model showed up with a completely conventional drivetrain and an explanation about customer expectations and cost targets? Yes, I remember that too. So I am not standing here telling you that everything Acura has promised about the 2027 RDX performance characteristics is going to make it to your driveway unchanged. What I am saying is that the direction they are pointing in is credible, and here is why. Honda's hybrid technology, which underpins everything Acura does in this space, is genuinely world-class. This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of engineering record. The two-motor hybrid system that Honda has refined over the past decade has produced some of the most thermally efficient powertrains in the industry. The CR-V hybrid, the Accord hybrid. These are not exciting cars to talk about, but from a pure engineering standpoint, the efficiency numbers they produce are remarkable. Acura took that foundation and added performance intent to create the current SHAUE hybrid setup. The 2027 RDX appears to be taking the next logical step in that evolution, and because the underlying technology is so mature and so proven, I actually believe they can deliver on the performance claims in a way that I would not believe from a brand that was starting from scratch. Here is my analysis, and this is where I am going to tell you something that might be unpopular. I think the 2027 RDX has a real chance of being the most dynamically capable vehicle in its class. Not just for an Acura, not just for a Japanese luxury brand, but in absolute terms against anything BMW, Mercedes, or Cadillac is offering in that price range. I believe that because of the torque vectoring capability that a dual-motor electric setup provides when properly tuned, internal combustion engines, even very good ones, cannot deliver torque with the same millisecond precision that electric motors can. When you combine that with rear-biased SHAUE distribution, and a chassis that Acura has clearly been developing around this powertrain, rather than retrofitting electrification onto an existing platform, you have the ingredients for something genuinely special. But here is the catch, and this is my honest opinion, rather than a promotional point. Acura has to actually tune it aggressively enough to be special. They have to resist the temptation to make it comfortable to the point of blandness. The current RDX has sport mode. It has paddle shifters. It has all the visual and tactile language of a driver's SUV. But when you actually engage with it, it softens those promises. It pulls its punches. That is a cultural problem inside Acura's development process, and it is a problem this 2027 generation needs to solve decisively. If they tune the new SHAUE system to genuinely bite, to genuinely rotate, to genuinely reward driver input, this thing could be a landmark vehicle for the brand. If they tune it to be comfortable and reassuring and easy to live with, it will sell fine and be forgotten immediately. I want to talk about something that I think is being underreported in the coverage of this reveal, which is the technology integration strategy. And I say this as someone who has, at various points, been deeply skeptical of the direction the industry is going with cabin technology. The move toward massive touchscreens and subscription-based features and over-the-air updates that change your car's behavior without your explicit knowledge. I find a lot of that genuinely troubling, and I think a lot of drivers in my generation feel the same way. We grew up with cars that were mechanical objects. They did what you told them to do. You understood the relationship between your inputs and the car's outputs. That relationship has gotten murky. What Acura is signaling with the 2027 RDX, at least in concept form, suggests they have been paying attention to the pushback from customers who feel disconnected from their vehicles. The approach they are describing prioritizes driver-centric information delivery over feature maximization. Rather than adding more screens showing more data, the intent seems to be giving the driver fewer, clearer, more relevant signals at the right moments. Now, I want to see that actually implemented before I celebrate it, because every brand talks about intuitive interfaces and then ships you something that requires 3 menu levels to change the seat heat. But the philosophy is correct, and the fact that they are articulating it publicly suggests someone internally has been listening to the complaints. There is also a conversation to be had about what the 2027 RDX means for Acura's positioning within Honda's corporate structure, and this is something I find genuinely fascinating from a business standpoint. Honda has been going through its own identity crisis at the corporate level. The relationship with GM on electrification, the subsequent pulling back from some of those joint ventures, the announcement of new independent electric vehicle platforms. Honda has been making a lot of moves in a short amount of time, and not all of them have been easy to interpret from the outside. Where does Acura fit in that picture? My read is this: Honda has decided that Acura needs to be the technology showcase for the group, not just a Honda with more equipment and nicer leather, but a genuinely distinct engineering platform that demonstrates what Honda's best engineers can do when they are not constrained by mainstream market considerations. If that is truly the direction, and the 2027 RDX concept supports this interpretation, then Acura is potentially entering a period of reinvention more genuine than anything they have attempted since the early NSXs. Speaking of the NSX, because you cannot talk about Acura's engineering ambitions without talking about the NSX, I think the second-generation NSX tells us something important about both the potential and the risk of what Acura is attempting with the 2027 RDX. The second-gen NSX was, on paper, an extraordinary piece of engineering. Hybrid A-D, twin-turbocharged V6, 9-speed DCT, 3 electric motors. The technology was genuinely impressive. The problem was the driving character. It was clinical. It was fast but not emotionally engaging. Reviewers and enthusiasts could not connect with it the way they connected with the original, and that is a failure not of engineering but of tuning philosophy, of the human decisions that determine what kind of relationship a car has with the person driving it. The 2027 RDX will face exactly that same test. Can Acura deliver sophisticated technology that still has soul? Can they build something technically impressive that also makes you feel something? That is the harder question, and it is the one I do not yet have an answer to. What I can tell you is that the competitive pressure they are facing makes failure very expensive. The BMW X3 in its current and upcoming form is genuinely excellent. The Genesis GV70 has surprised everyone with how complete a product it is. The Cadillac XT5 has been quietly improved to a point where it offers a compelling case for American luxury in this segment. Acura cannot afford to show up to this fight with something that is technically interesting but emotionally flat. The market has too many good options for that. I also want to address the question that a lot of you have probably been thinking about since I started. What does this mean for the current RDX owner? If you are driving a third-generation RDX right now, and a lot of people are, because it has been a genuinely good vehicle despite my criticisms, should you be excited or nervous about where this is heading? My honest answer is that you should be cautiously optimistic with an emphasis on cautious. The technology direction is right. The competitive ambition seems genuine this time rather than performative. But Acura has made us promises before that production reality could not keep. The track record matters. The current generation was announced with a lot of enthusiasm about precision-crafted performance and driver-centric dynamics, and while it delivered a competent vehicle, it delivered a competent vehicle that stopped short of the promises. If the 2027 generation delivers 90% of what this concept is suggesting, it will be the best RDX ever made by a significant margin. Getting from concept to 90% of concept is the hard part. There is one more dimension to this that I want to share before I wrap up, and it is a more personal observation. The automotive enthusiast community, people who have been passionate about cars for their entire lives, who can remember when buying a new car was an event that the whole neighborhood paid attention to, who have lived through the muscle car era, and the Malaise era, and the Japanese performance era, and every reinvention in between. That community is watching what happens with brands like Acura with particular interest right now, because the industry is at an inflection point that is as significant as any we have witnessed. The transition to electrification, the integration of artificial intelligence into vehicle systems, the shift in what younger buyers prioritize, these are not small adjustments. They are fundamental changes to what a car is and what a car means. And for those of us who fell in love with cars when they were purely mechanical, purely visceral, purely about the relationship between a driver and a machine, there is a real question about whether the cars being made now and in the near future will offer that same emotional connection. The 2027 Acura RDX concept, as far as I can interpret its direction, is trying to answer that question with a yes. It is trying to say that sophistication and electrification do not have to mean disconnection, that precision engineering can still produce something that makes you want to drive it rather than just ride in it, that a luxury SUV can be genuinely rewarding for the person behind the wheel while also being practical and technology forward and commercially viable. I want them to be right. I genuinely do, because Acura was right once. Back at the beginning, when they were proving something, the 2027 RDX feels like an opportunity to prove something again, not to the segment leaders, not to the analysts, to the people who have been buying Acuras and hoping, year after year, that this would be the generation that remembered what the brand was supposed to be. We will find out soon enough whether the production version delivers on that promise. When it does arrive, we will be here to give you the full picture, not the promotional version, not the carefully staged narrative, but the honest evaluation that this channel has always been built on. Because after all these years of watching this industry, I still believe that the cars that matter are the ones built by people who genuinely care. And for the first time in a while, I am starting to believe that the people building the RDX might actually care again. That is worth paying attention to.